Hi, my name is Benedict. Today's video is going to be more on story. Now, I keep encountering people who have a difficulty with the idea of story. Remember that in greater art circles, the term that I use, story, is normally narrative, as in, we kind of go somewhere. And that used to be a pretty important part of something. Even if you watch older Simpsons episodes, there's a time where Homer Simpson becomes, a great artiste based on his cobbling together basically garbage, and people create this sense of narrative out of what he's doing, and he becomes a famous artist. That is funny because it's The Simpsons. It's also funny because he had no real sense of what he was doing, other than I think he was supposed to be building something, a swing set for Maggie or whatever the first time, and he just got it so horrifically wrong, and this person saw it and it's like, ooh, it's art. At that point, what he was doing, questionable as what he was doing was art, but someone could see a narrative in it. They could see it as the expression of the common man, or whatever the thing was that they ascribed to his, incompetence. But that's an important expression of, or lesson about, narrative or story in art. Now, a regular person I speak to, a friend of mine, we've been talking a long time about this idea of story and how to put story into our pieces of music. And he asked again about it, and he said, hey, can I do another video, try and help him crack that. Now, I know he's not the only one struggling with this, so he shouldn't feel singled out or bad about this at all, because I think the majority of people are not getting the sense that music's telling a story. It has to be about telling a story. What the story is that it's telling is up to you. I know there has been, through the postmodernist, post-manners movement, this sense that, oh no, it destroys art to make it, art's just about, it's like, well, that's fine, but if you just throw bricks over the fence and take a photograph of what's left and say that's art, to some extent, you have controlled that. So part of you may well have instinctively thrown more bricks to the left, fewer bricks to the right, so that you end up with an unbalanced pile of bricks to take a photograph at the end. There's narrative in that. Why did you do that? So the question here became, and this is the middle of the conversation, but it's a bit that I really wanted to pick up from and run with. He said, well, in a more of a band setting with acoustic instruments, you would have a singer who could literally sing a story. Yeah. You could. If you are in a band and you decide that you want to sing a song about anti-Trump, because it's all the rage these days, and I'm not being pro or anti, it's topical, then yes, you can have a vocalist who can stand up there and say, kill Trump, kill Trump, kill Trump. And it becomes obvious what your piece is about. The story of your piece is, we don't like Donald Trump and, we want to get rid of him. It's mean and messed up. But that's really obvious what your story is. But then we've got to ask ourselves the question, what else would we have in that mix? We could, in theory, release a song that was nothing but what I just did. Sample me singing, kill Trump, kill Trump, kill Trump. Release it, call it a song, that's it, brilliant, we're all millionaires. But it's unlikely to work, because it's unevolved. There's nothing to it. So straight away we'd be starting to think, we need something else to back it. And what would we back that with? Now, most of you are probably already starting to think Rage Against the Machine, Black Flag. If you're Aussie, maybe Midnight Oil. Now, what's in common to all of those? Hard-edged, aggressive. See, there's narrative in that. When you have hard-edged and aggressive, you've already got some narrative. So we could write a love song Oh, Trump, I love you so much, you have such magnificent hair. If we called in our best buddies Cannibal Corpse and said, now we got this love song, and they hack into it like Cannibal Corpse does, is that going to give us the same outcome as though we called in our other buddy, the one with the lovely hair, Michael Bolton? You see, there's two different ways of approaching this. Now, if our love ode to Donald Trump and his magnificent hair was a genuine love ballad, but we had Cannibal Corpse sing it in a typical Cannibal Corpse style, is it going to sell the story well? It might be hilarious, but in terms of Lady in Red, it doesn't work, because we've mismatched our narrative elements. So just having a singer, yes, it might make it easy because you've got literal words, but the problem with that is you're thinking literally, you're approaching this head on. And as you'll see me often say, here and often in written word, my written articles, is that music is not a thing that you can come at straight on and expect to win. And you might be going, that's Zen bullshit and it's fucked up and you're not telling me anything. But I'm telling you the truth. There's a reason why Zen often uses these appearing riddles. Before I studied Zen, mountains were mountains. Then after I'd studied Zen, mountains were no longer mountains. Once I understood Zen, mountains again became mountains. That's a way of saying we often have to come at things sideways before we can get them. Especially with something like music, because music is not a literal thing. People keep trying it literally these days. If I get the right preset, then I will have the right piece of music. If I get the right mix, if I get the right mastering plugin, it doesn't work. And the proof of the fact that it doesn't work is that the forums are littered with people trying this and having it fail. They go and watch another 2-minute YouTube tut with better lighting than I've got that tells them to do the same thing again with some kind of variation. Oh, you EQ this way, or you only cut rather than boosting, or some other bullshit thing that lets people start that cycle again. Okay, great. But it's not about making music. It's not about telling stories. Stories don't care whether they're EQ'd up or down. All they care about is, are they told, and are they told well? If they're told poorly, well, it doesn't help. But if the story is compelling, and even told relatively poorly, it'll still work. Which is why there used to be this movement, the whole acoustic thing, unplugged, that you could take any good song, pull out the amps, pull out all the effects, pull out all the studio, all the processing, have one guy going slinga, 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 and singing his song, and it would work. Some cases more than others, but you know what the reality is, a great song will work. I bet with a half-passable presentation, I could pick up Dio's lyric for Mob Rules and sing it, and someone would go, you know what, that's a really interesting track. Winning. That's the way we got to go. We got to stop coming at it head on. Yes, the idea of having a singer tell us exactly what we're supposed to think is one way of doing it. And we're not saying don't have singers, but not all of us have singers. And not all of us work in an area in which we even want singers. They're a pain in the ass. Half the time they do want to sing anti-Trump garbage. You know, you want to sing a love song and they're all... Good on you. The next bit was then doing the same thing when limited to only synthesizers. Only to synthesizers is very different. That, of course, gives me the heebie-jeebies. I'm a synthesist. Only synthesizers? What? I'm inferior because I use synthesizers? I only use synthesizers because I've got nothing better? I would use proper instruments if I could. Now, I know there's a lot of that. A lot of that. It's the wrong reason for synthesizers. It really is. If you want a real bass player, get off your hairy backside and go out and get one. And I'm not having a go at this particular guy, but the fact that this represents a whole kind of thinking. It's the band-in-the-box thinking. Now again, I'm not being anti-band-in-the-box. It's a very interesting piece of technology. If I felt like I could use it to benefit myself, I'd use it. I'm not convinced, so I don't. Don't feel like the instruments that you have to hand are only, because you're shooting yourself in the foot. Oh, I've only got Dave Grohl. Is that what you'd say? Oh, I've only got Lars Ulrich. Oh, I've only got Eric Clapton, Mark Knopfler, Eddie Van Halen. Only? You work with what you got. This is really important. That's part of, again, coming at it face on says I can only do it one way. No. There's a million ways to skin a cat. Poor cat. Work out how to work with what you got. If you're thinking that what you've got is not what you want, either be creative and find a way to turn what you've got into what you want, not by trying to pretend. I hear far too many songs where, instrumentals even, where people have been like, oh, but I want it to be metal, but I don't have a guitar and I'm not going to learn to play guitar. And I'm going to use one of those VSTs where they've got a pile of samples and I can pretend I'm a guitarist. You know what? They sound like shit. I am sorry. Sometimes I've heard them and they sound okay, but most of the time the tracks end up sounding like shit. Not because I'm anti-VST, I'm a synthesist. The reason I didn't go with them on my own metal record was because they didn't sound like anything. Now, a lot of people said, oh, but your metal record sounded like shit anyway. But it sounded like my shit. It didn't sound like formulaic. I'm too lazy to learn to play guitar, or I'm too lazy to strike up a relationship with somebody who plays guitar, which I can say is a lot harder than it appears. So let's not go down the path of saying that the instruments that we have are inferior. Let's use them and use them well. In the early days of samples, yes, they were quite limited compared to what we've got today. You had one sample. If you were lucky, you had one sample per octave. And you didn't have lots of layers, 128 layers of samples with round robins and all kinds of stuff. Scripted legatos, all this sort of shit. You didn't have it. But go back and listen to Vangelis or someone like that who's working with samples as well as synthesizers and what have you, and you don't listen to it thinking, ooh, there's a sample. It's not like something got sticky taped to the front of the mix. Oh, look, you've got to accept that that's a violin's one because it's from Spitfire. There was none of that kind of shit. There was just the, here's my line. I have used what I think makes my line speak beautifully. Doesn't matter whether we're talking about lovely music or Cannibal Corpsey music. That's the whole aim. Don't let your instruments, or lack thereof, be a problem. If you've got 0 instruments, God gave you one of these. Okay, if you've got something wrong with that, then yeah. But you know what? One of the singers I find the most interesting, not easy to listen to, is a guy called Cedar Branches. He wouldn't know what the tune was if we hit him over the head with it. But the courage in his recordings is just amazing. Unfortunately, he's hard to find because he's kind of left the internet. I think he's currently got something on Wix, but he's prone to just pulling everything up. He's a little out there. But the courage with which he tells his stories is tremendous. So, and then it's one thing to create a scene or a picture with sounds, but where can it go from there? Now, I commonly say, if you're coming into this fairly new for me, create a scene and tell a story in it. Because telling a story without a scene is hard, and that's what I mean when I talk about if we were going to sing a Michael Bolton love song, would we hire Michael Bolton or would we hire Cannibal Corpse? I'm not saying either is right or wrong, but if you're trying to do a Michael Bolton type thing, why would you hire Cannibal Corpse? It would make no sense. So the scene when our corpse grinders start out, and what have you, is already beginning to be set. When Michael Bolton starts out with a nice string quartet, the scene is starting to be set. What we go and do from there is up to us. Yes, we could, and there are ways to break those kinds of things. The Ramones did it by doing a sort of 60s girl group song. Very, very cool. It's iconoclastic because it's the Ramones and they're kind of butchering this 60s girl group type song, and it's wonderful because they know what they're doing. So set a scene and then you're going to tell your story. We don't always know what our story is going to be at the beginning, and again, I really have to emphasize, our story doesn't have to be particularly literal. Woke up in the morning, brushed my hair. Yes, there's a Beatles song like that, but it doesn't stay literal for very long. It suddenly goes pff, Admiral Halsey and holes and all kinds of weird stuff. But there's story in there, there's narrative in there at the wazoo. So how do we take that and turn it into a 3-minute song? But, to go from, I've got this many bars and I'm stuck, to turning it into a finished piece. Cool, no worries. Now let me play you one. I just released this, put a video on it. I'm not great at video, so if you're sitting there judging me on the video, you're refusing to come at this sideways. Come at this sideways. The piece is called Gumshoe Noir. Gumshoe as in the old-fashioned detective. Jimmy Cagney, that kind of thing. Spencer Tracy. And noir because it's the cinema noir, because that was the thing. So this piece is a couple of minutes long. Let's walk through it.
Hey, over here.
So what have we got there? I've set a scene. Exactly what's in that scene I haven't really said. But we've got those footsteps. Visually I'm echoing them. We've got somebody who says, hey, over here, which yes, I did recycle. But I said it, so I've got the right to recycle it. And the person obviously changes direction to whoever called them. There's a gunshot, and the person runs away. Now you'll see it visually there. I've changed the person's footsteps from black and white to red. What does red mean? They're evil. They're running away with their red right hand. He's dead. Now this music was all written before any sense of video. I merely thought to myself, okay, well if I'm going to create something around the idea of that detective show, what's going to happen in it? I'd actually started with the first sound that you hear, which is this funny, slightly industrial, mechanically sort of sound. And that comes in and it creates some tension. It's both smooth but a bit at the same time, and then there's a second sound that works with it, which is a bit smoother, but they build some tension. Now, this is music. You're looking at it visually here, but in terms of music, it's music. I've just got to build tension. So something's happened, obviously, and I don't bother pointing out what has happened ever. There's an allusion. If you watch particularly the whole album video, there's an allusion to something that's happened, but there's never there. The story is very vague. There's this scene, and we're building up tension, because that's what these movies do. Within the music, you can hear this kind of turgid, like a washing machine sound in that first main sound that's there. And then I start to bring in pianos, but just like the look here, the physical look, is that it's kind of dark. We get this vague impression we're perhaps looking out the window, but it's inside his office, everything's black, and it's nighttime, so it's noir, it's dark. Ooh, girly. But musically, we're still just building tension and a little bit of release. We've got the piano line that adds and then releases, adds and releases. And there are other instruments that work around it that do the same thing. Playing with space there. So you've got that sound in the background, and then we're just playing with space. I'm making the sense that things hang. So in those movies, you've got often got this brooding sense and the sense that things just hang. There's these long, slow moments. Ooh, something's happening. So we're building up tension to that point. We're not doing it very aggressively. It's not like I've got Cannibal Corpse in the background flailing around and making us more and more annoyed, kind of like listening to Metallica's Black. I'm not doing that here. This is supposed to be subtle. It's supposed to sort of seep through, kind of like the smoke in the room. It's just this sort of dark vibe, without attempting to be evil, just dark. And I've used elements of even the shower scene from Psycho kind of thing, but I haven't gone too heavy on the playing several consecutive minor seconds or whatever. There's a little bit of that there, but it's just that, ooh, something exciting's happening. In this case, I've visually played it out as the inevitable connection between her and him. Then we could go somewhere completely different with our music. But then we've got to say, how much sense does it make? Musically, that'd be like... Ooh, someone bought my record. Cool. Thanks, Michael. Michelle. Yes, Michelle. If I play random notes, it doesn't make a lot of sense. We've got to tie things together. So I bring the piano figure back in using what's called a variation. So it's related to what I played before, but it's its own thing. Neighbour with his bike. Yeah, motorbikeing. Yeah, motorbikeing. So it's just playing with the whole sort of big orchestra, making things dramatic. But again, it goes backwards and forwards between the grand and the subtle. There's no point being huge if there isn't a more subtle side to it. Because you end up not being bombastic if everything is at 11 all the way through. For 11 to be relevant, there has to be a 1. Now notice I've added another instrument here. It's actually there earlier, but you don't really pick it out. But it's there. It's good to announce things early in music. But we've added a variation on the classic lonely brass, old jazz trumpeter playing in the streets at 3 a.m. kind of thing. Because it's very much a thing of the times and reflects what's going on. He's out there walking around on his own, trying to piece together what's happened. Okay, that's kind of plain James Bond almost, very 60s tacky. But he's contemplating the things that he has learnt through the places he's gone, the people he's spoken to. This is what a gumshoe does. So this is musically, it's that sort of creating that sense of confusion and trying to work our way through it. Restating a lot of where we've been before. It's important to restate things. Songs with choruses tend to do a lot better than songs without choruses. Oops. Bloody women. It's a circular piece. A lot of my pieces are kind of circular in that they often tend to end up or echo back where I started. You can decide whether that's good or bad. It doesn't matter. That's not the point of this. Whether you like my piece or not is irrelevant. I'm not showing it to you for you to like or not like, merely to try to say, well, this is how I do it. You can and must need to work out how to do it yourself. But remember, it's always by coming at things sideways. If you come at things head on, they will resist you. But I talk to try to help you think, well, okay, that's how I could come at that sideways. This one, just because I've done it, super pleased with the way the video came out. It's amusing. In terms of piece of music, yeah, it's simplistic, but I don't see a need to be anything but simplistic a lot of the time, because I'm a minimalist artist. So, what do we do? How do we do these things? How do we create? Well, again, we got to think, what are we writing? I just had to do some judging in a songwriting competition, and one of the guys did a sort of a Rage Against the Machine kind of thing. Okay, pretty cool. Politics, don't agree with his politics, doesn't matter, that's not the point. But when you do a political rant, there's a certain thing you kind of have to achieve. Now, he started with the funky sort of Faith No More type bass line and some guitars and what have you, and some of that was quite good. Some of it was obviously sample players and what have you, and it just didn't sound authentic. And I don't mean didn't sound like Faith No More, as in it just sounded more sticky taped on than part of an organic mix. That's a problem, because he's focusing more on some technicality rather than, well, what's my story? But then when it came to the vocal, the whole thing became too polite. Now, if you've ever listened to Jella Biafra, the guy's a fucking nutter, but he's good at what he does. Full Metal Jack-Off. Johnny Rotten. Johnny Rotten was probably the poster child for ranty songs. Or Henry Rollins from Black Flag. Again, another guy who's really a master of the blah. The problem was he'd started to worry, and he's supposed to be making me feel rage about what Donald Trump's doing with keeping us at home for the COVID thing. Right, wrong, who knows? Don't care, not interested. But the song should, grab me by the ragicles and make me go, yeah. Whether I agree with them or not, it should still make me do that. Killing in the name of. Do I agree with them? No, I think they're probably stupid, immature schoolboys saying a lot of shit. But Killing in the Name of, that's a great track. So, that gets me considering some of their point of view. He hadn't committed to his vocal delivery, so it fell away. That's, again, a version of me saying, if you want to do a soppy love song, you're not going to start with Cannibal Corpse. Or if you are, you're going to have to work out how to make that work. As I said, like Ramones did with, I can't remember the name of the song, but the 60s type song that they did. Very clever, very cool. There are a few artists who've crossed borders like that, and it can be really cool. You can do it, but to start with, let's go with what's obvious. So if we're going to write a love song, we don't need a lot. Okay, that's probably not a very good love song. I'm shit at writing love songs. I really am. It's not a me thing. So we probably should put aside the idea of love songs because I'm not going to deliver one. I deliver what I deliver. That's just what happens. But we need to start with a sense of, well, where are we going with this? Now, we don't always know where we're going when we start, and this is important. A lot of people have said to me, but, it's like, yeah, I get that. Sometimes you come in and you say, this is what my track is going to be about. I've done film score things lately, like the Westworld scene. Obviously, the Westworld scene defines what it's about, but I've still got a choice as to how I attack that, how I put my thing on that. So let's start with a... I'm going to waste time with bass lines, so I'm going to put that in here too. So, half a chord. Good enough, Shari. Good enough for me. So, nothing quite like a... Oops, better when you press Control. Moved it already. Let's make sure we're all in... There we go. Don't want to change key. That'd be confusing. Lovely. We've got a sense of some movement and something happening. That's all we have to do. For now. We can't sit here, because that's going to get pretty pathetic. Now, it would be tempting to say, okay, well, I'll have one bar there, one bar there, one bar there, one bar there. Then I'd have 4 one-bar things. Bit pedestrian. So let's see if we can break it up. But we also need to make sure that we don't break this up in a way that's going to become problematic. Which means that we don't want to put in rhythms that are so weird that they become useless. Convention versus unique. You can go all convention, which is kind of like saying, yes, I'll just take stock, this, that, and the other from Band in the Box, tick all the boxes in Band in the Box, hit publish, and say, yay, I just wrote a song. That's all convention. It's going to technically be all correct, because I believe that basically everything Band in a Box does is technically correct. But is it going to be interesting? No. Or we could go the other way and plug some random notes with random sounds into our DAW and publish it. It might be unique, but it's just random. We've got to balance the two. How you choose to balance the two is coming at things sideways, is how you do your stuff. So let's see what we've got. Nice. This is probably not the right sound for that. It's great before, but then it becomes too slow. This is all part of story, and you might go, but this is just technique. No. This is story. Everything is story. You might go, yeah, but that's just because you're obsessed with story. Maybe so. But story is the way in which I define what we do. You may choose to call it something else. But essentially, it's still down to how you choose to present your material. Is this legato? This section? It's sustained, it's legato. Or is it sort of spizzicato or something or other. That defines how you're setting up your scene, your environment, your movement, the way you articulate your sounds. Okay, cool. Now, please, if you're sitting there judging and going, but this isn't very good, of course it's not very bloody good, because I'm making this shit up as I go and I'm having to talk at the same time. So if you're sitting there judging, either you shouldn't be watching, or you're actually making your fundamental error again by being judgmental rather than looking at the quality of the material that's been given. And there's so much of that, and it causes so much damage, because the people who are the most judgmental that I see in forums often have the judgment call worst music, and often the least music as well. So you go, okay, you're very pedantic about all these rules, but what's it brought you? If you've written Dark Side of the Moon, I'm with you on it. I really am. If you followed that up with Wish You Were Here and The Division Bell and what have you, then I really want to know what you have to say. But if you've got virtually nothing to show, and it's not real good, and at the same time you're sitting here being all judgmental on whether this is good enough or pro enough or following the rules enough, then I'd say that's a real fundamental part of your problem there. Throw shit at the page and then work it out from there. If we go judging this too harshly right now, we can't do anything with it. If we give a rock to Michelangelo, that's the guy who chipped things, isn't it? No, was he the painter? I don't know. Some old ugly dude who chips at rocks and makes guys with their doodles hanging out. If we give him a rock, a big rock, because you wouldn't want the guy to have a small doodle, would you? If we give him a big rock, yes, he may say, look, there's nothing I can do with that rock, because it's like loose granite. I'm not going to be able to do anything with it, because as soon as I hit it with a chisel, the whole thing is going to explode. That's not judgmental. That's merely a judgment call based on his experience. If we give this rock chipping dude a big rock and say, hey, I want you to make me a sculpture out of this rock, find what you find in there, it might take him 10 years to realise what's in that rock. And sometimes that happens. People would sit on a rock for ages until they go, you know what, there's a bear in there. If we judge or be judgmental straight away, we get given the rock and we go, nah, I can't see a dragon in it. That's a fucked rock. Take it away. How's that wise? So, it's got a sense of story in it already. And this is the next bit, and this is where a lot of people come undone. Remember my friend said, how do we turn that into 3 minutes of song? I've got 4 bars there. 4 bars is at 120 BPM is 8 seconds. But you know what? I hear something in my 8 seconds. And this comes with practice. If you don't practice and don't think about what you're practicing, and don't be aware of the thoughts and feelings that come to you, the real ones, not the, there's no dragon in that rock, take it away. If you look at the rock, you feel the rock. Physically, if you must. I mean, it's between you and the rock. Then, at some point, you're probably going to feel like there's a bear in there. So I feel this as much as I can. And there comes a point where there is something in here. Ooh, and guess what? I can tell you what's in here right now. Some tough notes. But you know what? I'm going to leave them there. That's part of what makes them interesting, I think. Let's try this again. Nice. Okay. Now, one of the problems that I see with a lot of modern music is that it would stop at 4 bars and just loop that ad nauseum. I worked on a rap track recently. We did not get it to release point. Sadly. I worked hard on it, but... You know. And it was about 4 bars of music, over and over and over and over again. Not very interesting. That put so much more pressure on him to have to be interesting. But it also meant that there were no breaks. So between when he started talking and ended talking, there was no break, no gap, no breather, just the blah 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 blah. Too hard. Now, it's not to say that you can't do it. But don't make things harder for yourself than they need to be. So let's not say that we want everything to be exactly the same. We must balance convention with uniqueness. So at the moment we've got something that's interesting. It's interesting in part because it moves a tone. This becomes minor. It goes up and actually has a wrong note there too. So it's actually sort of changing key in the middle. Weird, but hey, why not? It's my thing. It's about the feel. So I'm going to say let's go with that. Now this one, it's to the same. Oh yes. Great. There's a similarity between these two halves. We're now at 8 bars. Doubled our piece of music. 16 seconds, we're winning. What's my scene? What's my story? I don't rightly know. But there's a narrative in here. You can hear it as it moves from here to here. Now, if you can't hear that there is something narrative in there, that there's a sense of story, a sense of its scene, there's something in there, then you probably should pack up and go home. I'm sorry to say that, but this is fundamental stuff. You need to learn to hear that there is something in there. What is that? Is it a dragon? Is it a bear? Is it a glass of whiskey? What's in there? What's that talking to us about? This is a bit odd. It's quite... Comes back to our root, which we need to do, because if we do weird shit, we've got to pull it back. Otherwise, it's just... So, this is one of the really important things. Even though we don't know what our story is, we can feel that there's one there. And that allows us to make decisions like, well, here we went up, here we want to go down a little bit. We've moved one step here, and we've done the same thing here. But we've gone... There's a similarity there. So we're creating a conversation. In the first half, oh, how was your night last night? How was your night last night? Oh, it really sucked. Oh, it really sucked. We've got a conversation there. Really, really important. And I didn't come up with a conversation thing. It's been from at least the jazz years where they talked about conversation. And if you watch the Hans Zimmer masterclass, I haven't seen the ad, one of the very first things he talks about is music being a conversation. I could say this, and then I might say that. He does it better because he knows what to do with those things. So, let's try and get a sense of what this might be about. There are both up and down things in here. There's something kind of majestic about the ending. Obviously, because we've come back to our root, so we've created a kind of a cadence there. Exactly what kind, don't know, don't care, but it's there. The beginning, more somber. Let's for the moment assume this is going to be our whole piece. That's not enough. Doesn't matter how many drums we put on that, how big the bass line is, how much we sidechain every fucker to every other fucker in here. It's not enough. We have to build. Let's say that's our scene. Let's say the thing that comes to mind is of sort of a fairy tale realm, castle, damsel, dragon. Dragon gets, well, we all know what happens to dragons. Brilliant. So now we've got a scene. It's all very well to say that's it, that's good enough. And I hear a lot of material online, a lot of stuff where people go, oh, well, I can be a film composer because I do this. And they've got a static picture. Not only to represent their piece, you know, here it is on YouTube and I've got a static picture, or on SoundCloud I've got a static picture that I took off Zelda or wherever. That's my piece of music. Here, I've scored this scene. No. You've merely drawn a single picture. And there's no movement in it. We need to have movement. So we've set our scene, fantasy realm, castle, princess, dragon, dragon slayer, dead dragon. Brilliant. So now we've got a story, haven't we? You see how the story is just... it's inevitable. With that scene, we've got scene and story. That sets the scene. Let's let that sit as it is and go over here. Ooh, brilliant. Who doesn't love one of those? Don't ask me what it is. Let's edificate them. This is where at least a fundamental understanding of harmony comes into play. If you don't have a fundamental sense of harmony, you are going to struggle. Now, you don't need a lot. I've got a set of articles out there on basically how to hack harmony. But let's run through it simply. C major, the only key worth using. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. That's it. That's our palette. In this case, I've broken some rules, or bent them, rearranged them to suit myself, and we've ended up with one of those and one of those. But we haven't turned it into C minor. Ooh. And nor do I particularly want to turn it into C minor. That'd just be too obvious. So we've got to be aware that we've got some changes in here. Unusual, but hey, prog rock did it, Benedict can do it too. Besides, it's about dragons. So we're going to want to start to create some movement. What's the best way to have movement? Chords that go bleh, bleh? No. They're not. They're chordal movement, but they're not a character. If we're playing that video game, What moves? Our little dude runs around sorting stuff. He doesn't move in a caudal fashion. That's like changing scene from day to night. We've got to have more subtle movement in that. So let's see what we can come up with. The easiest place to start is on your root note. Let's be bold and have a passing note in there. Oh, I feel heroic already. Is that not magnificent? I might change the colour of this. Yellow is really hard to work with. Light blue. I can see this. Now, we're starting to develop a problem. So either I've got my approach to melody wrong, or I'm just going to change my backing, one or the other. That's better. That's better. I'd kind of played through my hole. Now you could do that, but it was going to mean I would probably need to have either this instrument, like your string instrument, filling that hole, or something else filling that hole. The fact that you notice the hole tells you, okay, there's a problem with my narrative here. But if we highlight the hole, that's kind of cool. We've chosen a lower note rather than the top. In this case, we've picked the two notes, but there we've done something unusual. So what are we going to do here? Guessing. Ooh, tension. Again, guessing. Ooh, I do like that last bit. It's like bloody jazz, isn't it? It's brilliant. Okay, I keep wanting to save, but this is not something I need to save. Now, we did this before. So let's do that again. Now, here we had a ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba, whereas we haven't had that. We've had something different here. So we don't want to forget the ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. We got some issues with this. We do have some issues with this. Might be better. And this is... Oh, okay, there's part of the problem. Because we are in the... We chose some wrong notes to start with. This needs to be triumphant. This is my whole story right here. Or at least an encapsulation of it. It needs to be triumphant on the end, and at the moment it's not quite triumphant. Not here. It'll do for now. It's not great. I've got some issues in here, but we'll have a look at those too. That note's a problem. We've got to deal with that note. Okay, I don't dislike that. Yes, there are probably plenty of technical reasons why it's not quite right. But I'm not going to spend any more time on that because it's long enough for you to watch that as it is. But just the sense of, okay, I've got to sculpt a story. There's got to be some travel here. We've got to go somewhere, we've got to do something. So we start with... ba-ba, ba-ba. It was so good the first time, it's worth repeating. Look, this guy's heroic. We've got a ba-ba-ba, which is this again. So we're restating that, but it's going in a different direction. It's traveling down. So he's having some problems here because it's going down. It's not going up, it's going down. And then there's some repetition, which is like, well, maybe I'm a bit stuck. Cool. We use this, but we've changed the timing. Ooh. Now, if this were a piece I was really writing, I would actually take this and that would be the leader for the next section. Because it's growing, we're beginning to have triumph. It's too short a period, for me at least, to be able to write a complete conclusion at that point. But look what we've got. We don't want them both in blue because that's going to get confusinating. Wheat is nice. That to me very much says we've got narrative going on here. We've got two sounds that, loosely enough, complement each other. Neither is perfect for its role, but we don't fully understand its role yet, if in terms of a fuller piece, but we've given it a direction, and it's one that I don't have a problem with. It does work. We can build up from there. It would be very tempting to say, but I have to whack 909s on this, with a 55% swing, blah, 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 blah. But hang on, at what point do 909s feature in medievalist fantasy? Does 909s really represent princesses? You might hope that the girl that you meet's really into your 909, but is it really a princessy thing? No, probably not. Probably not. I don't know whether there is a feminine drum machine, but it's not a 909. Maybe it's a CR78, although I think that's a bit more. Maybe it's a 606, maybe it's a TR606. I don't know. I don't know whether there is a feminine drum machine. But if we just go, my point here is if we just go saying, but I put 909s on things, we're not honouring our story, because not only does it, there were no 909s in Medievalia. It's funny, when I put out Run from the Sun, and one of the places I ended up submitting to when all the metal guys were like, this isn't metal, you have to go to... And I went to a dungeon synth group, and the guy there was like, it's it's not medieval enough. It's dungeon synth, it's not medieval enough. And I'm sort of thinking, yeah, which synthesizer came out in sort of 1385? Was that the Juno 1 or the Juno 2? Help me here, I don't really remember. So we can break our sense of story by putting in things that don't belong. That doesn't mean that we can't do it, but we just need to be aware. If we decide, yes, I want to put in 909s here, then we're not putting in 909s. And you go, but Benedict, you just said, but no. Because saying I want to put 909s in here because 909s, it makes no sense. It's me being, I'm the god of my peace, and if I want 909s, I'm going to bloody well have 909s, and the rest of you are just going to fucking live with it because I fucking like 909s and you suck. You got that right. But is it helping build a story? If we decided at this point we do want some electronical drums in there, like I said, I'd be thinking, well, how can I have electronic drums that are a little more feminine? Because we've covered our hero here. Later, maybe in the next section here, where we expand on his heroicness, then we might have 909s with distressors all over them. Although that seems more dragony to me than knight errant, but whatever, your call. But don't put 909s on because 909s. Think, what sound is going to represent what's in my place, what's in my mix, what's in my story? And as I say, my guess would be CR78, 606, or the Korg micropops, mini pops, KR55s, something like that. Something that's very much in tune with chiptune. So there's no real conflict, but see how we want to match. If we decide that we want to get a little bit more orchestra-y with this, then drum machines and orchestras don't always go together. Doesn't mean you can't do it. Believe me, I have. But how are we going to make them work together? What's more important? So we want to build up what our story is, and that is largely by taking the time till we get to that point where we can look at the rock we got given, which might be the first couple of bars that we made, and say, there's a bear in there. And then we got to start chipping away to expose the bear. And you might say, but I'm composing, I'm adding notes. Yeah, but think of it this way. That's my rock. That's one octave. I've played most of those notes in here. But it doesn't sound like that, does it? That's what I've played, but it doesn't sound like that. Let's choose this sound. That's what I've played. Doesn't sound like that. So it's how I've chosen to arrange those notes that helps me define what that is. And by then I'd started to say, well, okay, this is what I'm going to set as my story, as my scene. So it then becomes obvious what I'm going to do. Now, I am not the most elegant with melodies. I set out to be a record producer, not to be a composer. Being a composer happened to me. But I make do with what I got. You can still hear ba 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 ba. That's heroic. We start to sail a little close to the wind with our harmony there. That's nice. That builds tension. Kind of lets some of that out with a flowing line there, but it's still. We build back up to our heroicness. That's how we expand story. What comes next? Well, I would be grabbing probably another instrument that's similar-ish to this one. Not that one. And I've got strings here, so maybe I'd go with brass, or maybe I'd go with another synthy sound if I want to stay synthy. But I'd probably change some of those sounds, or maybe I'd keep this here and then add another brassy sound or something like that at that point, and our second lead, which is then going to climb and be more heroic. Now, if we're thinking that this introduces our castle and the fact that there is a princess in it, maybe we even want to introduce our princess here. Actually, not here, because we need this line to grow, unless we decide, okay, I want to break that growth. Maybe he comes back, maybe he has slayed a dragon, he's come back and he's sort of thrown it at her feet, and she's gone, you killed my pet dragon. That's doable. Why not? Cannibal Corpse can write songs about chopping people up and putting them in your freezer. Why can't we take our story in a slightly different direction? I'm all heroic, I killed the dragon, and you killed my dragon. Why not? So we may then, where we introduce a sound for her, if we were going to have her as the pretty princess, we would probably have a nice lyrical string. Something like it. But now if she's a little on the you killed my dragon side, then we might take some elements of that and then make it. So think in terms of how do we do that? Tempting to say, but there are only certain sounds I can use. No. Don't go down that path, because that's coming at it head on, saying, well, if I don't have the exact articulation, then I can't do this, I can't write this piece. You're screwed. You really are. No, think in terms of, well, what's happening here? She's suddenly gone, well, you killed my dragon. So what is that? That's kind of an aggressive sound. So let's think. Let's see, what's that going to be? You killed my dragon sound. I haven't made a you killed my dragon sound, so this could be fun. It's going to need to be a bit hard. Let's put it into the same reverb space. Nothing worse than making instruments that don't live in the same world. You have a lot of problems with those. Little polite. She's not that happy. She is not happy at all. I hear the scorn already, yes. Don't know why that defaults to looping. neutralize her. Oh yes, that's nasty. See, we don't want to unison her because that's going to make her seem soft. In this case, she is having at you because you just killed her dragon. Think of these things when you make sounds. Don't just go, but I like my sounds to have like 38 unison layers. It's not about you. This is about you representing a pissed princess. Let's make her a little more cutting. Now you can get all kinds of distorty and what have you. What have we got here? Yeah, right. Let's try this. I rarely get a result from this, but it's here. Okay, I feel it. We're going to reduce that because we're ripping. Don't you just want to marry her already? So we'll carry our same bass across, and by bass I don't mean boom 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 bass. I mean we'll carry our same musical platform across, just because I really don't want to have to make another section. Now really we should. At this point we really probably should be going, well, we should be saying, well, I probably should have a variation at this point, because we've got to move, we've got to change, and at this point there is a sudden change because we've gone from from one direction to another. Like our princess is, well, she's pissed. So I forgot where I was. This is kind of important. Now actually I'm going to put that in as well, just because I can see where we're going. So now I like that, so I might just put... See, I'm already thinking in terms of story. Like how's this gonna feel? So the first thing that we've got to do is say 6 dB, and that's kind of nothing. Oh yes, we're starting well here. Because remember, she's pissed. She's gonna rip into us. We just killed her dragon. How dare you kill my dragon? So let's just expand this a little. Expand this a little. What do pissed off princesses do? They tend to say the same thing over and over again. Let's try this. Can you see what I'm doing here? This. We're actually copying his theme. What do pissed off princesses do? They're prone to parodying us. You think you've got such a big penis? I'm not being sexist here. Really, I'm not. We've got her annoyance here. Let's see what happens here. I should move that back slightly, just as I should move that back slightly, just to make sure the other note strikes first. She's a bit relentless to begin with. Nature of the pissed off princess. But we know what's going to happen. We know what's going to happen. She's starting to realise that he's a bit cute. Well, okay, maybe you're alright after all. So, again, not great. And also, if you're sitting here and if you're this type, you probably haven't even got this far. But if you're sitting here thinking, yeah, but that doesn't sound like my type of music. It's like, yeah, get over yourself. Again, you're coming at it head on. You're saying music can only sound one way. Bullshit. If it could only sound one way, we wouldn't have Cannibal Corpse and Michael Bolton both selling records at the same time. We do, because it can sound like this and it can sound like that. And then some enterprising freak manages to put the two together. Do your thing. Find your thing. So, what we have now is, well, look, 3 times the amount. 48 seconds of music. You might go, yeah, but that's 48 seconds. But, you know, we've got a lot of material here. We've got a lot of ideas to work with, too. See how our ideas have grown as we've worked. So, loops off, because I don't want this to go round and round. I just want to see, well, what comes next? Best piece of music I ever wrote. It's not. What I'm hoping that you're seeing through this is not sitting there judging whether this is good or bad music. It's not the point. It's rare that you can write good music whilst you're talking to somebody else, because your attention's everywhere else. But the fundamentals are here. We've got some sense of scene. Yes, to some extent we've invented that. We've just gone, I'll apply that to this. Just as Mr. Rock Chippin' Dude looks at a rock and goes, there's a bear in there. He applies the bear. Is there really a bear in there? No. Some other sculptor might come along and go, there's a naked lady in there. Who's right or who's wrong? Unless one of them starts chipping open the rock and their creation causes the rock to explode, they're both right. It's just the way they see it. And they're going to tell the story that they see. Whether that's a bear, a naked lady, or a man with his hanging out. So we've arbitrarily decided on a story. As I said, we could go in saying this is going to be about. But I've shown you the way that I work. I'll often finish a whole piece before I decide, yeah, I think that's what I'm saying here. It's all right. So long as I can feel that there is story, so long as I can feel that there is narrative. And again, by story, it's not saying literally, like we started to create a literal story here, but so long as we can feel like there's movement and narrative, that we're going somewhere, that there's conversation, that there's tension and release. Well, we've got some tension here. And then there's some release here. Might just be 3 simple notes, but they're related to those 3 simple notes. So we've gone in a different direction. There's some release there, and then a little bit more there. So we've created some tension here, which also happens to be the point at which our backing chords get weird, tense, odd, broken. We climb up here. So that's actually building tension. It's building a positive kind of tension. It's a heroic kind of tension. Look, dead dragon. We could go to the great big... But remember I said we're going to actually chop that off. You did what? So it's all tension at the beginning. But then it starts to even out. We've got the echoes of him and coming together. So, again, I wouldn't use the same thing, but I'm going to because it's not going to work out in terms of timing. But what happens if we do just this? This is the lazy man's way of doing it, but let's just say, what happens if we do just this? There's worse things I could have done. You know what, in musicals they commonly do that. 2 different points of view. Matter of fact, I think they do that in Grease, where they have the... Yeah, they do. Towards the beginning of Grease, you've got Olivia and John Travolta singing in separate places about the same event from 2 different perspectives, and they're singing together, but they're not singing a duet, if you know what I mean. But I'm heroic. No, you're not! So I've added a whole section without doing a damn thing. The reason I can do that is because I'm vastly clever. No. Simply because I have set my key and scale and I've stuck to it. So that's the only reason that works. We'll actually just undo that bit there. So now we would probably say, let's see what we can do to bring them together. We're going to say, look, this is the last bit. This is a bit where it all finishes up. In which case we want to get them together. They're together, but they're working against each other. Their melodies are, or their melodic themes are, moving around each other rather than together. So we might just be very simple and say, okay. There's up and down, but it sounds conciliatory. That's all we got to do. Now let's carry this to here. Okay, cool. We could use another bar on the end here, just to let those things hold. But that's trivial stuff to say. Let's extend that another bar. We're not gonna fuss on that. But notice how I've made slight changes between where he and she plays. It's very slight, but it's just enough that there's still two different characters in here. They can move at slightly different paces from each other. So now we've got what really was kind of a scene with a fantasy medieval castle. There's a babe, there's a dragon, and there's a hero. That's our scene. That's there. Next bit is here. We've actually had our heroic guy do some stuff. He's introduced himself, he's puffed up his chest, he's come along. Ooh, dragon. Tangled with the dragon, killed the dragon, picked it up, walked up to the princess, and she's just sliced him off at the... because that was her pet dragon. Curses. So she yells at him, but at the same time as she's yelling at him, she starts to realise maybe he's a bit hot. They continue their argument by each restating their argument. This is what people do. They say the same shit over and over again. You know, it's like they say the same shit over and over again. Then it has to resolve. If it doesn't resolve, what's the point? They'd have broken up. Where's the fun in that story? Jennifer Aniston and Vince Vaughn, guess what? They get back together. Otherwise we wouldn't watch the movie. So we pull them back together, but again, just that little bit of detail where sometimes they speak slightly separately from each other. Whole story. Made up, bullshit, doesn't matter. Narrative. Now, something that you may not have noticed, but it's worth hitting the rewind button if you haven't, is that even though this is exactly the same all the way through, it never changes. And it should. And there should be extra little gaps in here and all kinds of stuff, but we don't have the time for that. Well, I do, but you don't want to watch this. It's going to be long enough as it is. The feel of how this backing behaves, how it sounds and feels, is actually different in each section. Now, I don't mean obvious or simplistically different. Oh, sorry, for some of you, you might be missing some of the end section. My big head's in the way. None of this has changed. It's the same no matter where we are, but it sounds different because of harmony. Again, I'm never going to get too much into harmony because my theory is rudimentary. If you want to really understand harmony, actually don't waste your time. You'd have done it already if you wanted to. But understand the psychoacoustic side of it, the way the brain reacts, which you already probably do with a power chord. Ooh. Sort of a smaller power chord, grander power chord. So you already understand some of the psychoacoustics of harmony. How hear how this note here appears to actually change. I've made the sound duophonic, that's why it chops off. The overall what you hear changes based on what's happening around it. Now you might go, but this is really obvious, but you know what, this is part of your job as a composer. You play with that. So the way this sounds here and the way this sound here are actually somewhat different from each other, which means that to some extent I can actually get away without changing that. And in the Middle Ages, that's exactly what they used to do. They'd have a ground bass, and it would just be blim, blim, blim. Oh, except it was through the whole piece. But you didn't necessarily hear it that way. Some forms of techno do that. Psy tends to do that. They've got this one note you're allowed to play. I think it's F sharp. I guess the only note you're allowed to play. Fuck off for that. But it's related to that idea of everything that moves around it changes the feel of it. So we should change this, but we're not going to because we don't have time. But we can get away without changing it because we've changed what's happening in the top lines, which is a very old term which has come back amongst rappers. Oh, I want a top line, please. It's one of the few terms they're using accurately. Just about every other term, completely inaccurate, but whatever. Let's not take away that one thing they got right. That's it. We've applied our sense of story. Now we could orchestrate this a little bit better. And by orchestrating, I don't mean whacking orchestras on it. Simply by saying, well, what extra sounds do we want to fill this at? Might have some sound effects, might have some wishing wind sounds, dancing candlesticks, whatever the hell you want to tell your story, to fill in the scene and the story. You're allowed to have subtext as well. Here I've got two characters speaking, but there could be a third. A singing snowman. It's worked before. Singing snowman may have a love affair with a dancing candlestick. Why the hell not? Believe anything. We can work those in as well. It's a little harder in music because it's not as visual, but there is nothing wrong with you saying, okay, I want to have an extra little something. Matter of fact, let's have a quick go at adding a little extra something, which is kind of nothing, but might just add a little bit of movement. What do we want? We want a synthesizer is what we want. When all else fails, Thor it. And one of those. And a little bit less of that. what I'm doing now kind of comes as a result of having done this for a long time. So if you're looking at it going, how can you make a sound without playing it? Well, I've been doing this for 30 years. And I pay attention to things when they work so that I can understand them. What am I after? Arpeggiator. 1, 2, 3. Let's live dangerously and put some triplets in. Couldn't get much nicer if we tried. Except I think we're going to have some problems with bottom end here. Nothing worse than having a big bottom end. Alright. Again, rather than creating some new material, let's see what happens if we use the existing material. Works for me. Okay, we do have an issue here, which I should have thought of before. Obviously, they can't speak. They're far too fast. So we will pull those, the fams back, so you may hear them call out. So it's not going to change our lives, but we've added just this extra layer of something. We'll tempo sync that. We might not want to keep that all the way through, but because we wanted Magical Kingdom, there we go. In terms of thinking a bit broader in story and mix, let's just take our so we haven't moved a note, but we have taken the way the sounds speak and just rearranged them. Crop event clip. I'm going to do this bit that I talked about before, which is just going to be to expand these. Come here. So as we get to the end, so those two obviously need to fade. Now this is, it is mixing, but it's kind of not mixing at the same time. It's your job as a composer, and most of you are doing this anyway, at the point in which you're making things to tell people how they behave. So you don't always want to... Oh, we've already got a volume, that's good. So I've just got to automate here. You want to be able to provide your pointers. Sometimes you'll hardwire those things. Sometimes you'll say, look, I'm going to leave them for the mix stage. See, I could have started to do some of this fading in at the beginning, but I wanted to focus on the notes rather than distracting myself into mixing, because once you distract yourself into the mixing, sometimes you're thinking about mixing, not about composing. And once you start thinking about mixing, then you go, but my guitar has to sound like a BC Rich Warlock through a Sovtech, through a Celestian Vintage. How do you know? What's that guitar line about? Because you know what? It might be the wrong tone for what you're composing. And is that not the loveliest piece of music ever? So just a few little arrangement things with regards to how the instruments speak, in other words, mixing. Ooh, magical. Strings. Not the world's best piece, but I hope you can see how we've applied a sense of story and scene. Now that's top down. You could listen to that and thinking that's about something completely different. That's cool, that's your business. But the fact that it's got narrative should keep that interesting and lead the listener to the next place. And preferably when they've got to the end, make them go, you know what, that was so much fun, I want to do it again. How many times have you watched Star Wars? Probably more times than you want to admit. Or if it's not Star Wars, it's Star Trek or Harry Potter or, I don't know, Orange is the New Black, whatever the hell. But something that makes you want to go back and back. So that's what we want to do, and to do that, we want to tell a good story and tell it well. How you do that's up to you, and we should avoid letting formula dominate the day. We've got to balance formula with uniqueness. Now there's uniqueness in here. It may be too unique for any of you to want to like it, but there is uniqueness in here. Those sounds are unique. They are not, oh well that's the same sound that everybody uses in Spitfire. I've made them in the mix. They're unique. So by doing that, we've got some sense of formula. We've got some sense of repetition, as well as within the melody, the ba-ba-ba, there's a little motif there that appears through the rest of everything in one form or another. It's diluted and modified, but it's still there. And we've got some repetition in this too, not only because it says the same thing over and over again, but because it's using all these notes that we've got in here. I hope that has helped you to understand how you expand. We've gone from 4 bars to 45 bars. It's fair to count the fade out in the end, so 1.5 minutes. It's halfway to your 3 minutes, but we're allowed to repeat some stuff. We might add a saxophone, but we're allowed to repeat some stuff. So it's really just in taking the time to comprehend, to find the bear inside your stone that you've been given. You might have made the stone yourself, but to find the bear inside it. And then to sculpt, to show the bear. And what's the bear going to do? Eat some honey? Great. Describe how that happens. Now, you're not going to do that literally by saying, here, let me tap a jam jar, because it's inane. No, you're going to kind of put some emotional feel in the walking, boom, 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 boom. Maybe finding a tree, ooh. Climbing the tree, you've got bees, bzzz. If you've got synthesizers, brilliant. You can synthesize insect noises. I love doing that stuff. Or if you're stuck with a goddamn old-fashioned orchestra, you can get with your upper fiddles or your little tutti flutes that represent your bees. Honey, yum. Bees going mental, so they can go from sweet little trills to kind of stuff. Bear getting attacked. Deep, 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 deep. Bloop, 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 bloop. As he runs away. Psh. As he jumps in the pond. Story told. You may never tell anyone what the story of that piece is, because you might be embarrassed that it's about a bear eating honey. But if people listen to it and they feel like something happens, they feel like there's that movement in there, the narrative, the story, they can love that and come back and listen to it again. They might ask you, so Mr. Don McLean, what does that mean? So Mr. Don Henley, what does that mean? And you might be like, I ain't telling you. Or you might be about, it's a bear and honey. It's up to you to decide whether you do that. I'm very open about my themes. I make them the themes of my records. But they have to be there. I hope that helps. If there are any questions, try put them in. Obviously, I'd love for you to subscribe. It just tells YouTube how popular I am and helps bring a little bit more traffic. I think it helps. It makes it slightly easier for you to find my videos, but probably not a lot. You're coming to see my videos a lot. It's what makes YouTube show you my videos a lot. But, subscribing, commenting, all that sort of stuff, putting a like on it, they're all really nice things, a way of letting me know that you're appreciating what I've done for you. You have a good day. Thank you.